Hello everyone, and welcome to Threadbare Reviews. At the moment, my Let's Play is focusing on Prey, the 2017 game about surviving on a space station that has been taken over by shape-shifting and body-consuming aliens. It's a very zoomed-in psychological horror game with themes about consciousness, morality, and the nature of being human. As such, this review series will focus on other works with similar themes: alien contact, existential horror, and a personal narrative rather than the big sweeping narratives you get from space operas and action films. As such, I'll be kicking things off by reviewing one of the clearest inspirations for the game, Ridley Scott's Alien, released in 1979. The story about the story. In 1974, a man named Dan O'Bannon worked with director John Carpenter to create a science fiction comedy called Dark Star. It started out as a student film, and so the budget was pretty limited even for a B-movie. The alien in the movie was a beach ball covered in spray paint, and this experience left O'Bannon wanting to make a movie featuring a much more realistic alien. He also wanted to make a horror movie in a claustrophobic spaceship with a small crew. O'Bannon ended up in Paris for 6 months working on a failed adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune, and that brought him into contact with several artists who helped him design the alien he had in mind. In particular, he met the Swiss painter H.R. Giger, a man who had an intense outsider art style and who would eventually create the iconic design of the xenomorph. Specifically, Giger adapted a painting called Necronom 4 from his art collection called Necronomicon. O'Bannon worked with another screenwriter named Ronald Shusett to iron out the script, which by now was titled Alien. They almost sold the script to Roger Corman, but eventually they sold it to Brandywine, a studio connected to 20th Century Fox. At Brandywine, filmmakers David Giller and Walter Hill made significant changes to the script, including the whole android subplot, which O'Bannon didn't like. But Brandywine and Fox would go ahead with producing the script after Star Wars made a tremendous amount of money in 1977. They gave it an initial budget of $4.7 million. This was when director Ridley Scott was brought on board. Scott's first feature film was The Duelists, released in 1977, and as a new director who was willing to take science fiction seriously, Fox brought him on board. Fox was also impressed by Scott's early storyboards, and more than doubled the film's budget to $11 million. Ridley Scott is better at directing sets than he is at directing actors, so he made sure to cast strong actors who wouldn't need a lot of attention to deliver good performances. That being said, the original script focused on the alien and made all of the human parts disposable and interchangeable. So Scott did a lot to develop their characters himself, including writing several pages of backstory for each person. He then filmed the cast's rehearsals along with their final takes to get as much realism from the actors as possible. Something else Scott did was invent the idea of the used future. The Nostromo uses old technology, even for the 1970s. The hallways are small, industrial, and poorly lit, and the characters leave their food wrappers and beer cans on the machinery. While Star Wars is about fantasy heroes in space, Alien is about truckers in space, and that made it very distinct from the competition. Alien was a tremendous success at the box office, with a domestic profit of $80.9 million and a worldwide gross profit of somewhere between $100 and $200 million. The exact figure isn't clear because Fox used screwy accounting to try and stiff Brandywine out of their profits. Regardless, the critical reception was mixed, mostly because a lot of critics at the time had no respect for science fiction or horror films. In 2003, Fox released the director's cut version of Alien and its 3 sequels, but the original version was pretty much what Ridley Scott intended, so he made only a few minor changes to fulfill the studio's demand. The review. Alien is about the cargo ship Nostromo. It has a crew of 7 members, and the crew are woken up halfway through a long trip in order to answer what seems to be a distress beacon on an alien planet. When they go down, they find an alien ship with a dead crew and a cargo of giant leathery eggs. One of the eggs opens and its inhabitant ambushes a crewman, and while the rest of the crew can't get it off, it eventually falls off and dies on its own. Then the creature's adult form bursts out of the crewman's chest and starts eating the rest of the crew one by one. Eventually, only the second officer, Ripley, is left alive. So she sets the ship to self-destruct, escapes in the shuttle, and then when the alien tries to stew away on the shuttle, she blasts the creature out into space and fries it with the shuttle's engines. Alien holds up pretty well considering it came out 40 years ago. That said, the effects and set design do show their age in places. The Nostromo exterior is absolutely covered in greebles, little bits of texture that don't do anything practical but do give a model a sense of scale. On the Nostromo, the greebles are downright excessive. Also, the exterior shots and planet landing sequence really take their time and don't add much to the plot or the suspense. No doubt this was the direct influence of 2001: A Space Odyssey, a movie that convinced filmmakers for quite a while to think of space as slow. Now, the interior design is where Alien really shines. Ridley Scott is a set director, first and foremost, and you can see that in every angle of every shot, and the attention to detail of every light and every bit of set dressing. When the situation is safe and normal, or at least if it seems that way, the lighting is very bright and even. When the situation goes south, the lighting becomes very dim and moody, and when the alien is nearby, the lights start flashing. Something else about the film is that it's very moist. The characters sweat a lot, especially in close-up shots. The alien has fluids running down its mouth, and at one point one of the crewmen walks into a storage room where water is just raining down from a spotlight in the ceiling and some chains are waving around. There's really no reason why this room should be raining and chaining, but it really adds to the tense atmosphere. The Nostromo interior was clearly designed to be a horror movie set rather than a practical spaceship, and honestly, it benefits from that focus. Now overall, I'd have to agree with Dan O'Bannon that the android crew member was a pretty pointless addition. A traitorous crew member does make sense. It adds to the tension and helps explain the stupid decisions that get made in horror movies like these, but the traitor could have been a normal human. Now, him being an android did add a special effects spectacle, not to mention even more moisture, but in terms of the plot, it didn't need to happen. Also unnecessary is the android's speech about how the alien is some kind of perfect organism unclouded by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality. We have those on Earth, buddy. They're called tigers. Now, the crew does make some stupid mistakes, but in context, it makes sense. They're a bunch of space truckers, not humanity's finest soldiers or scientists. They aren't equipped physically or mentally for this kind of problem. Plus, they've never encountered this kind of alien before, and it keeps surprising them. And as far as the acting goes, all 7 of them are spot on. So whether you've seen Alien before or not, this movie is still worth your time. The analysis. There are a few different themes in the plot and visual design to unpack, so let's get started. First things first, the title. O'Bannon eventually settled on Alien for the movie's name because it has a double meaning. The first meaning refers to the extraterrestrial creature that's killing everyone. The second meaning refers to alienation, that feeling you get when you're alone, isolated, or in a place where you don't belong. That's the emotion that Alien is going for, and so the theme is that human beings don't belong in space. Look at what happens to the crew of the Nostromo. They happen across an ancient alien ship that they know nothing about, encounter an alien life form they can't begin to understand, and because they don't know what's going on, a single alien is able to pick them off one by one. And that's just something they happen across. Now you do get the sense that this encounter wasn't an accident. The company the crew works for, Weyland-Yutani, gave the ship and the android a directive to pick up a live specimen to transport back. But even so, there's no indication that the corporation would know how to handle this thing. And at the very least, the crew certainly don't know how to handle it. Something else the movie does is create a juxtaposition between the organic and the mechanical. The Nostromo is intentionally old-fashioned, even for the time, and it's filled with clunky computer noises, clacky buttons, steam vents, and a bunch of industrial equipment that 2 of the crewmen are holding together with spit and baling wire. The EVA suits swallow the crew up, and control consoles are bigger than the people who operate them. On the other hand, the alien ship has a sleek biomechanical design that merges the organic and artificial. The dead alien they find on the ship has merged into the control console, and the living alien has the same design thanks to H.R. Giger's creepy biomechanical style. This dichotomy also feeds into the alienation theme, since it shows how alien life is far more advanced than humans are. As such, the android in the film either fits into this theme or it undermines it, depending on how you look at it. In one sense, the android is another example of a biomechanical organism, and it underlines the theme by helping the alien and admiring its design. On the other hand, the android's existence proves that humans are, in fact, bridging the gap between them and us, and the difference isn't as insurmountable as it first seemed. Then, of course, there's the sex and rape angle. With H.R. Giger involved, this connection is fairly hard to avoid. Not only does the alien's head in the movie look phallic, the drawing it's based on is an actual head penis. The alien, in some sense, rapes and impregnates its host, and after it matures, it starts stalking and assaulting its victims one by one. Another interesting thing about Alien is the caste dynamics. The crew is composed of 4 white men, 2 white women, and 1 black man, and those 4 white men are the first 4 to die. Having a woman be the survivor is a traditional horror movie trope, and Alien was partly inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which also had a female survivor. But even so, it is interesting that the white men were all killed before the black man died. And while the survivor Ripley does need to be rescued by a man at one point, and the other crew woman becomes panicked and emotional, Ripley also kills the alien by herself after it stows away on the shuttle. The mark of a good horror movie is that it plays with conventions like the minorities die first or the woman never kills the villain on her own. But what's most interesting to me is how this ending came about. Like I said before, the original O'Bannon script made all the human characters interchangeable, and so it was up to Brandywine and Ridley Scott to give the characters personalities and assign genders. The original ending was just to have Ripley escape on the shuttle as the ship blew up. But since that was boring, Scott added a sort of 4th act where Ripley and the alien confront each other directly. Scott originally intended to have the alien win, but when the Fox executives heard that, they threatened to fire him unless he let Ripley win. So yeah, it's kind of funny how studio meddling is sometimes the reason why movies break conventions. Thanks for joining me for today's Threadbare review. I hope I'll see you next time. Until then, please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and if you have a little extra money to spare, you can support me on Patreon. Link in the description.